Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind, episode 84.
One of the things I firmly believe is that life is too short to do something you hate.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Do not curse the darkness, rather light a candle instead." If you're ready to set your mind on fire, then prepare yourself for the Luminous Mind with your host, Rebecca Bowman.
Today's fire starter is Grant Baldwin. Grant is a nationally known keynote speaker and expert at helping people find and do the work they love. His podcast, How Did You Get Into That?, has over 30,000 listeners every month and has been ranked the #1 career show in iTunes. As a speaker, Grant has given hundreds of presentations and has spoken to 350,000 people in 45 different states through leadership conferences, conventions, and other events. His book and curriculum for students, Reality Check, is taught in 400 high schools around the country. While Grant does love speaking and inspiring others, his favorite roles are husband and father. He's married to his high school sweetheart, and together they have a Barbie dream filled with their 3 girls. They live in Nashville, Tennessee. Welcome, Grant.
Greetings and salutations. That sounds like a nice little bio you put together. That was good.
I got it from you.
All right. I thought that might have sounded familiar.
Great. That's awesome. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and your hobbies and your passions, and then, of course, your profession?
Yeah, so appreciate you letting me hang out with you guys today. So I actually grew up in Missouri, born and raised there. Like you mentioned, I met my soon-to-be eventually wife. We started dating when we were in high school and got married and have 3 beautiful little girls. And so early on in my career, I was actually a youth pastor for a little while and got into that, really enjoyed it. But one of the things I really enjoyed about it was I really enjoyed speaking. And so after we left that role, I decided I wanted to try to figure out, could I become a speaker? Is this even an option? I didn't see this on the menu anywhere. Just trying to figure out this full-time speaking thing. So it took me a little while to figure it out, but we became a speaker, and we've been doing that full-time for about the past 7 or 8 years or so. Travel, like you mentioned, all over primarily the U.S. and speaking at different conferences and events. But really, really love what we get to do there, and we've had a fun little business and fun little ride.
That's awesome. And your wife helps you with that then?
I mean, a little bit. So she's more, she works much harder than I do with 3 little girls. So,
exactly. I was going to say
I'm sure we'll get into it later, but we homeschool our girls, so she keeps plenty busy with that. So that's kind of the main thing that she works on. I don't have a ton of involvement with the homeschool stuff, so I'm just kind of like the awkward PE teacher that's always just hitting on the principal. So that's basically my contribution generally.
That is great. So do you want to tell us about your personal educational experience, like kind of where you came from as far as your education goes?
Yeah, I graduated high school and then went to Bible college, and so got my bachelor's degree there. And like I mentioned, my plan was always to become a youth pastor. And again, parts of it I liked, parts of it I didn't. But one of the things that was real eye-opening to me was I graduated and started down this path, and I was there for a couple years, but just quickly realized that I don't know that it was what I wanted to do long term. And so I felt like I think a lot of people feel, where I go to college, I have this one specific degree, this is what I'd planned on doing, and then I get into it, and I don't know that it's what I want to do with the rest of my life. But I've already invested 4 years of time and tens of thousands of dollars in money to get this thing. So should I abandon it at that point? Should I go a totally different direction? And so it was just kind of a conundrum I found myself in, just going like, what do I need to do with this education that I've been given? And so even today, as a speaker, I speak to a lot of high school and college students, and so one of the things I challenge students is I'd prefer that they think wide and not necessarily deep, meaning that if you're going to get some really niche degree, you can really only use that for that one thing. Generally, if it's a real niche thing, but if you have a general business degree or a general music degree or general whatever that general thing is that you're interested in, you can use that in a lot of different ways. And so I think most people aren't wired to do one thing, one specific career for the rest of their lives. Most people, we do a variety of different things because our interests change, our hobbies change, our passions change, our stage of life changes. So people even ask me today, how long long do you want to be a speaker? I said, I'll do it as long as it's fun, as long as I keep enjoying it. But when it's not fun, we'll do something different. But I don't feel like I have to be a speaker for the rest of my life. And so for people that may be listening, I think it's important for them to take some of the pressure off instead of feeling like I've got to know one thing that I'm going to do for the rest of my life, rather than as opposed to feeling like, you know what, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do this for 3, 4, 5, 7 years, whatever. And then if I decide to do something different, that's okay. But if that's the case, then going all the way back to the education piece, I want to make sure that I keep that in mind rather than, I'm going to study underwater basket weaving and hope that I can do this for the next 40 years. When you just realistically, you'll probably change. So that's definitely something that has kind of helped shape and help me think about where I'm going in the future, that what I'm learning today may not be applicable just for my current situation, but it may be applicable in many ways in the future that I can't forecast. I can't see what those things will be. So it's definitely shifted some in that regard.
Yeah, and sometimes when we're going to school and we have to change, life experience takes us down different paths. We feel like we've kind of cheated on that. Like you said, like you felt like you had abandoned that education, but that's not true, because the education that you get hopefully helps make you a good, well-rounded person and understand things better. But
yeah, as it relates to college, like I always tell students that college is good, college is fine, college is expensive, and so you need to have a financial plan of how you're going to pay for it, rather than just going to college and racking up a bunch of debt. But I think it's just really important that if you're going to go to college, if you're going to go back to college, be really, really clear about why you're going. I think a lot of times people go to college because they don't know what they'd rather be doing, and they're just trying to buy themselves time. It's kind of like the perpetual learner and student, and you need to be a learner and a student, but the student who is buying all the courses online and they're continually going to classes, but they're not actually implementing it. Like at some point you have to actually do something. And so I think sometimes college can be that crutch where if I just keep going to class, then I don't have to figure out what I actually do with what I'm learning. So I think you just have to be really, really clear on, if I'm taking this class, or if I'm taking this course, or if I'm getting this education, what is the end result? What am I going to do with it, rather than just gathering information and knowledge just for the sake of more knowledge?
Yeah. Well, in America, we have this idea that if you go to college, that's the path to the dream life, that everything will just fall into place and that you'll just instantly be successful when you're a college graduate.
Right. But go ahead.
Well, like you said, it takes that implementation of what you're going to do with that education that's going to make all the difference.
Yeah, and that would have been true maybe 30, 40 years ago. Of the standard plan is you graduate high school, you go to college, you get your degree, you find an employer, you work with that employer for the next 30, 40, 50 years until you retire, and you get the gold Rolex, and then you sail off into the sunset. And like that was the traditional model. But that just doesn't work today. In life and in this economy and in life in general, like you're not guaranteed jack squat. So there's plenty of people who are ridiculously smart that have way fancier degrees than I'll ever have, but they're unemployed. So you have to be able to understand and realize, again, what that degree is helping you towards, because it doesn't guarantee you anything, but what are you going to do with that as a result of the knowledge that you're gaining?
Exactly. That's wonderful. So you have like a curriculum and a message that you relate to students. Do you want to tell us about that, and what is that overall message?
Yeah, so several years ago I wrote a book called Reality Check, and basically Reality Check is and it's for high school students, but it's 50 short chapters, 2, 3, 4-page chapters. Each chapter answers a different question. So things like, should I go to college? What classes should I take? What do I major in? Job interviews, resumes, internships, credit cards, budgets, taxes, just life 101 type stuff. So it had been doing really, really well, really been helping students. So I speak at a lot of education events and student events, and so I'd start having teachers and educators ask me for, do you have any type of curriculum for this? And I was like, I don't even know how to spell curriculum. I've never been in the classroom. I've never taught as a formal teacher. So I would have no idea what you would need. So I worked with a couple teachers and partnered with them to help create the curriculum, just so that we have this tool and this resource that can teach a lot of these life skills in the classroom. So the curriculum it's a very interactive thing. It helps students to really ponder and think through and learn some of these practical life skills of, how do you make a budget, and how do you pay your taxes, and how do you do a job interview, and what needs to be on your resume. And so it seems like, a lot of times like school is really good at preparing people for more school, but oftentimes they're not good at preparing people for life. And so that's part of the gap that the curriculum we're trying to fill with, is helping people realize, like, when you graduate, whether you go to college or not, even beyond college, like, there's just some basic things that you got to figure out. There's some things that you got to know. Dealing with a roommate when you go to college, moving away from home and kind of navigating those relationships with mom and dad, moving back in with mom and dad. So all of those just type of nuanced things that you just, like, you have to understand those. You have to grasp those. You have to know what the fine print on a credit card statement means. Some of those just, like, basic things that we just don't think through. And so we're trying to use the curriculum to cover a lot of that.
Well, if that is actually information that they can use, that's great. So how has your paradigm or your educational philosophy kind of changed over time and with experience?
Well, I think a couple things. One is, whenever I went to college, the plan, like I said, was just to always do this one thing. I always wanted to be a youth pastor. And so now, again, I think it's evolved in the standpoint that, like we were talking a little bit about earlier, of thinking more broad rather than just narrow. So looking back, I think I would have done something different in terms of college. But it's also affecting my own view of my own kids. Like we talked about, I've got 3 little girls. They're 9, 6, and 4. And so we're still a decade off or so from college. But my wife and I regularly have those conversations of, if 20, 30 years ago that college was the guaranteed ticket into success and to career and whatever, but that becomes less and less so, does that mean that college becomes less and less relevant? So as we are setting aside money for college and investing towards that into the future, we're oftentimes wondering, like, how relevant is college going to be? As a speaker, nobody's ever asked me what my degree is in and decided whether or not they were going to hire me based on what my degree was in. My sister is another good example. She is a graphic designer who is an incredibly, incredibly talented graphic designer. She does all of my stuff. And so if anything on our site or podcast or anything looks good, it's completely her fault. But she went to college for it, but she would tell you, like, she didn't learn a lot from that. And nobody would ever hire her because she had a degree if her work sucked. But if she didn't have a degree, but her work was amazing, they would hire her. So it just makes you wonder, like, and again, some of this is very, very dependent on the career. Meaning, if you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, if you want to cut me open, I'm going to need to see some pieces of paper that you've spent years and years learning about this. But if you're wanting to, start a blog, if you're wanting to start a podcast, if you're wanting to start some type of service business in your community, oftentimes that doesn't require a lot of education. And so, or at least not in the traditional sense of you need to go 4 years to college in order to start a blog. Like, that is not true at all. And I found that a lot of people our age would say that, college was fine, but I used so little of it for my own career and my own business today. So it shaped me and kind of changed my paradigm and how I look towards the future, but also how we're looking at education today, meaning we just wrapped up our second full year of homeschooling our girls. Our oldest, she was in public school for kindergarten and first grade and had a great experience. She's a super, super sharp, smart little girl. We were at a great school, phenomenal teacher, phenomenal principal, just a great, great situation. But part of us were kind of wondering, like, okay, as an entrepreneur, I asked this, like, why do you have to go to school 8 to 3 or whatever it is, Monday through Friday? Or why do you have to work from 9 to 5 Monday through Friday? Well, just because that's the way we've always done it, So yet we found that oftentimes she spent so much of her time just like sitting around because she gets her work done quickly. So we'd always been intrigued by the homeschool idea. And another reason being that we like to travel a lot. As a speaker, I'm naturally traveling a lot, so I like to bring my family on trips. And so we were constantly pulling them out. And it wasn't like we're just going to the beach every week, but we're trying to make like educational experiences and trips for our children. Because it's one thing to read about the Washington Monument. It's another thing to go to D.C. and actually see it and show your kids that. And so that's one of the things we were trying to do. So we decided to go the homeschool route. And it's been a great, great experience. It is and again, this from my wife, it is a crap load of work. But not only has it been beneficial from an educational experience, but it's also been great from a family experience that we spend a ridiculous amount of time together. So before, if my daughter's getting up and going to school and then she's gone all day, I just wouldn't see her that much. But now she's home right now. She's, 15 feet outside of my office right now playing around with her sisters. So I can see them throughout the day rather than feeling like, I'm only seeing them, a couple hours at night or right before they go to school. So just the quality time of being together has changed. So several years ago, I don't know that we would have thought about homeschooling, but it's been a phenomenal move for us at least.
Yeah. Well, and you're able to focus on what your kids really love instead of, like you said, them just wasting time. They're just doing a checklist of what somebody else feels is important instead of you being able to put in there what you feel or she feels is important in her life, being able to be driven more by her intuition than by some school bureaucrat. So,
yeah, I mean, at this stage, they're all in elementary, so they're not... they're going to be getting like the basic stuff either way, whether they're with us or they're in school. But as they get older, there's so much that we were all taught in high school that just you don't use and it's just not relevant. But that's the way they've always done it, and so they're not going to change that system. So I like the idea that as they get older, and even now, especially with our oldest who's 9. Of just trying to focus on what are the things that you are interested in? What are the things that you want to know about so that we can begin teaching you? That's one of the things I also like about the homeschooling, and just kind of a byproduct for us is it's so important as a human to be able to know how to learn and how to teach yourself, which seems like just such a basic thing rather than just sitting in a class and being spoon-fed on something. But I mean, there's been several times where my daughter's done something. Last night, for example, she's really into loom and those little rubber bands that you can kind of piece together and make different things. And so she comes in and shows me this crazy cool little loom creation she made. And I was like, how'd you figure out how to do that? She's like, I found a YouTube video and watched it. And so just like that type of stuff of like you need to know how to teach yourself something.
Yeah.
And if you want to learn something, you need to know how to find that information. It's not just, well, I want to learn something, so I guess I'll just go to the local library. Yeah, you could do that, but there's also a lot of other ways that you could gain information or knowledge. So I like that they are learning how to learn and how to teach and educate themselves rather than just waiting on someone to spoon feed them.
Well, and that type of learning, that stays with them for the rest of their life. It took me until I got to college to realize I was responsible for the education, that I got. Sure. So awesome. Would you like to tell us, we talked about a little bit about you struggling on figuring out, what you wanted to do in your future, but would you say that was the biggest obstacle you faced, or was there something else? And then tell us what you learned from that struggle that you had.
Well, I think one struggle was whenever I wrapped up that time as a youth pastor and kind of felt like I was just back at the drawing board of going again. This is what I thought I wanted to do for so long, and I got into it, and I was like, parts of it I liked, parts of it I didn't, but I just didn't know what I'd rather be doing. So it took me several months of just trying to figure out what I felt like I was having this quarter life crisis of what the crap do I do now? What do I do? Do I need to go back to college? Do I need to find something similar? Do I need to find something totally unrelated? And I think there's so many people that are just in that similar spot. A lot of people that reach out to me, that listen to our podcast, and people that listen to our show, of going I don't hate my job, I don't love my job, but I just don't know what I'd rather be doing. And so many people that are just thank God it's Friday to oh God it's Monday, and they just live life like that, just year after year after year. And so one of the things I firmly believe is that life is too short to do something you hate. We all have to work. We all have to make a living. We all have to get a paycheck from somewhere. So why wouldn't you choose something you love? And so everyone can do work that they love and work that they're passionate about, but it does require work. It doesn't just mean that, you quit your job, it's all magically falling into place. Most people just aren't willing to do the work, and they just think, well, I'm just going to, I've got a safe, steady, secure paycheck here, so I'll just keep doing this, and I'll become numb to it, and that's just the way it is. But there's so much more to life than just becoming numb just so that you can keep getting a paycheck at work. So I would encourage people to stop and figure out, what would you rather be doing? And this is a question I ask people a lot. Assuming you're guaranteed success, assuming time, money, location were all irrelevant, assuming you could do anything, what would you want to do in terms of a career? And some people can tell you exactly what they want to do. Other people are like, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. Because it's remember as a kid, if I was to ask any of my girls, what do you want to do when you grow up? They've got a million ideas. They've got a ton of different dreams. But as you get older, those dreams start to fade into the background. They just start to die because you just start to, well, it's not possible. It's not realistic. The timing's not right, and yada yada, and a million other just stupid, lame excuses that you could come up with of why you wouldn't put in the work to do something you love. So again, I think it's important for people to just stop and figure out. And this is something, again, that I did in my own transition, my own little, quarter life crisis or whatever you want to call it, of just going what do I want to do? What am I good at? What am I passionate about? What do I enjoy doing? If I could do anything, what would that look like? What would that be? And take the time to do some of that soul searching to figure out what you were put on this planet to do.
Before we go on, let us take a minute and hear about our sponsors. Changing a paradigm takes some study, but like me, you are probably super busy. That's why we've teamed up with Audible. Go to our website, theluminousmind.net. Get a free month of Audible with 2 audiobooks, thousands of titles in exchange for only books that you absolutely love. You too can be learning on the go to keep that fire burning. Welcome back to The Luminous Mind with Grant Baldwin, giving yourself confidence to find the work you love. Well, and you offer so many different services. If you go on Grant's website, I mean, you cater to students, but then you have a podcast that talks about, find the work that you love, those type of things. Can you kind of go through those products and tell us a little bit more about them, and then kind of what services you offer as well?
Yeah, like I mentioned, the main thing that I've done for the past several years has been as a speaker. So I speak at a lot of high schools, a lot of colleges, a lot of conferences, a lot of events for entrepreneurs, small business owners. We do a lot of motivation, and so that's been a good chunk of what our business has been up until this point. We have a book called Reality Check that we talked a little bit about for students, as well as a curriculum that goes along with that, like we talked about. But then we also have, as a speaker, a lot of people ask me, like, "Hey, Grant, how do I become a speaker? How do I get started? What are some things that I could do?" And so we have a training course called Booked and Paid to Speak to help people who have, I've spoken a few times or I've never spoken at all, but I know I could do this and I know I want to do this. I just have no idea how to begin. How do you actually find speaking opportunities? So we teach people that and walk people through that. We've got about 160, 170 people or so in that course right now that are getting booked and paid to speak now. And then we also have the podcast. Podcast is called How'd You Get Into That? And we're just interviewing people just doing interesting types of work. So sometimes you're going to hear someone on the show that may be right in line with what you want to do in terms of a career. Other times you're going to hear people that you're like, I wouldn't want to do that career, but that's just fascinating. You make a living from that. We just had someone who is an Etch-a-Sketch artist, a professional Etch-a-Sketch artist on the show. Just talked to someone who's a food truck owner. I'm interviewing a guy later today who is an NBA mascot, a guy that's a professional Lego builder. So some of those types of careers, like, that sounds kind of cool. I don't think I'd ever do that, but if you can figure out how to do that, then surely I can figure out my thing. So just hearing the stories and journeys of how people got into what they're doing. So yeah, that's kind of a little snapshot overview of what all we got going.
Well, it sounds so fun because it sounds like people are really using that kind of the inspiration of what, maybe God programmed them to do, combined with, a little bit of hope, like to be a professional Lego builder. That would be like every little boy's dream. So
yeah, and it's
awesome.
It's just. And so, again, part of it is, just the motivation, inspiration stuff of going, like, all right, you play with Legos and you make a ridiculous living from that? Okay.
How do you do that?
How do you do that? But, if you can do that, then, surely I can figure out my thing, And so I think it is just a dose of that motivation and inspiration that you don't have to just stick to your options are to be a doctor, a lawyer, or work in a factory. And that's it. It's like, no, there's an infinite number of options that maybe you didn't even realize were on the menu, that hopefully by listening to the episodes and listening to the interviews and hearing these people's stories, it does open your mind to the various possibilities that exist.
It's such a neat thing with technology. You can have a business just right out of your home, like you said, doing something that you love versus, trying to find a company or some sort of industry that would hire you for some of those skills. So
Right, for
awesome.
Sure.
So what other services do you offer? You talked about speaking and your podcasts and stuff like that. Do you help individuals and do some coaching or anything like that?
I used to do some coaching. We don't really do that anymore. Part of it is just from a scalability standpoint. There's one of me and there's only so many hours in the day. And so rather than helping one or a handful of individual people doing some of the other things that we're doing, whether it's the podcast or whether speaking, in big conferences. Right. Yeah, we've got a blog and whatever those types of things are where we can impact more people than we could just by doing from doing one-on-one coaching. So we've dabbled with it, but we don't really do it right now.
Okay. So what successes have you seen with your speaking and all of your curriculum and everything like that?
Well, like you mentioned, the curriculum's used in over 400 high schools around the country, which is cool. We get emails from students and teachers alike who use the curriculum that really like it. And as a speaker, I mean, speaking is really cool because you do get some of that instant feedback, of people who want to share with you their story, or people that want to talk with you at an event, or send you an email, or send you a Facebook message, or just sharing like, hey, here's how your message that I just heard impacted my life, and you had no idea what was going on in my world, but here's how that helped me. So yeah, as a speaker, you definitely get some of that instant feedback, which is really, really rewarding and satisfying. And even with the Booked and Paid to Speak course that we have, like I mentioned to you, there's a lot of people that are great speakers that just have no idea how to get booked and paid to speak. And so there's a lot of people in our course who have gone from 0 events to they're getting paid, $1,000 or a couple $1,000 for some of their first engagements, which is super, super rewarding when people are like, I had no idea what I was doing, and now all of a sudden I have confidence in what I'm doing, and I feel like I can confidently present my fees, and I know I'm really clear on what it is that I want to talk about and speak about. So all of that I find to be super, super rewarding for sure.
That's awesome when you can help people, lead them to a path that they find rewarding like that. So that's great. So we talked about successes. How do you think families benefit most from using your products?
Well, it kind of depends within the family of what they'd be looking for, So if you're trying to figure out what it is that you want to do with your life, the podcast is a great place to start. And again, listening to some of those stories, we've got about 110 episodes out right now. So there's plenty of different ones that you can go back and kind of cherry pick what you're looking for some help with. Maybe you recognize some of the names of people, or you're just going, okay, that sounds like a cool career. So I'd love to just hear something about that. Or maybe again, you want to do that career, or again, maybe it's something where it's like the Lego guy, and you're like, I don't want to do that. I'd be interested in hearing that interview just to hear what that's all about. So podcast is a great place to start for people if they're trying to find work that they love. If people have a high school student or nearing graduation, the book Reality Check is a great fit for them. And then if people want to become a speaker, if they are interested in that, maybe you're an author currently and you've got a message that you want to share, trying to figure out how to do that in a different format or different context, speaking is a great way to do that. And so all that information you can find at bookedandpaidtospeak.com.
Awesome. So what are some of your long-term goals that you have for your company and for your family?
Well, I always want to make sure that what we're building remains small enough that it's not going to overwhelm my life. So one of the things I firmly believe, one thing I talk about a lot about is that who you are is more important than what you do. Who you are is more important than what you do. Meaning that if I'm a great speaker, if I'm a great entrepreneur, if I make a bunch of money, if I make a difference in everybody else's life, but if I suck as a husband or as a father, if I'm a shell of a human being, it's just not worth it. And so I really want to make sure that I always maintain that balance. And so the important things to me in terms of my long-term goals are to be a great husband. It's to be a great father. Those types of things that really, really matter to me. In business, kind of like we talked a little bit about earlier, I think what business looks like is always going to evolve and change. I think that what my business will look like 5 years from now, 10 years, 20 years from now will be very different than what it looks like today. And so it's difficult to predict that. It's difficult to forecast that. But like I said, I do know that the long-term things that really, really matter to me are my family. It is being a good husband. It is being a good father. It is being generous with my time and with my resources. It is making some type of impact in the world. But that could look a lot of different ways. So yeah, we'll see what the future holds.
Yeah, keep your options open too. And I loved how you talked about how character really does shape a person. And we've talked about that before on my podcast, that how important, you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't have great character, that knowledge, that can be used for evil things as well, so
Sure.
Shaping that character and trying to, especially with your own children where you're homeschooling and stuff like that, such a valuable thing to be doing for the good of the world type of thing.
Right.
So.
Right.
Awesome. So what advice or encouragement would you give to somebody who's just starting out?
Well, in terms of like starting out their career?
Well, either one, because I think this could affect parents, that maybe want to take an alternative route to education, but, you're stuck in a job, especially if you're a single parent or something like that, or to a teacher who wants to give their students a little bit more information that's definitely more life skills versus just the knowledge that they're getting.
Yeah, I think in general, a couple things you want to do is if you're just starting out on anything, whether that's some type of transition or starting a job or starting a business or starting college or whatever it may be, I think you just want to be really, really clear on why you're doing what you're doing and where you're headed. So one of the things that Stephen Covey talks about in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is to begin with the end in mind. Imagine like if I travel quite a bit. So if I go to the airport and it's like, I'd like to buy a ticket. Or would you like to go? I don't know. Just somewhere, like.
Just put me on a plane and I'll be successful.
That doesn't help them. Don't be surprised if you do that and then you end up in a place you don't want to be. Oh, they sent me to some place that's cold and it's tundra. I don't want to be here. Well, you didn't give them any specifications. So if you're just kind of like drifting aimlessly through life without any real sense of purpose of where you're going, then don't be surprised if you end up in a place you don't want to be. But if you're really clear on where you're headed, and then you can kind of back into it and figure out what do I need to do to get there. Because it's really like we get it whenever it comes to driving a car or biking or running or some type of activity of just going like, this is where I am, over there is where I want to be. What's the best possible way to get from point A to point B? Like just knowing where you want to be and just magically closing your eyes really tight and clicking your heels together doesn't actually make that happen. So being really clear on where you want to go, what you need to do to get there is important. The other thing I would recommend is to look to other people as examples who are doing what you want to do or maybe who are where you would want to be in life. So for me, a couple different mentors of people I look to in business, people that are 5, 10, 20 years ahead of me that I'm looking to and just like, not necessarily what are they doing today, but what were they doing when they were at my stage in business or in life? What were the different steps that they were taking? So, oftentimes we look at people's career, we look at people's journey, and we look at like this A to Z spectrum. And Z is the mountaintop. Z is the sexy part. Z is where we want to be, but we overlook that those people didn't just skip from A directly to Z. It doesn't work like that. So I want to know, like, what were those early steps they took to go from A to B? And then what did they do to go from B to C? And again, this isn't just relevant or applicable just to like business. I mean, this is true with life. So, the other day I had lunch with a buddy of mine here in Nashville who's a multi-millionaire, very, very successful businessman. But we spent the whole time just talking about family. He's been married 35 years. He's got 2 daughters. And so I'm just asking him like, all right, you're 20 years ahead of me in that. So I want to know, what do I need to do to be a good husband? What do I need to do to be a good father? What do I need to do so that 20 years from now, my daughters still want to hang out with me and my wife still likes me? So what are those things? And so I think that's important, again, not just in business, but just in life, but looking to figure out like, who are those people that may be further down the road from you in any different aspect. I'm doing this right now with health. I've always been like somewhat sort of kind of health conscious, just aware of it, but not like overly, if I want a donut, I'm going to eat a donut, but the older you get, the more you realize, all right, I can't always do that. So I'm starting to look to people like who's people that are they're taking care of themselves, that physically they're in shape, they still enjoy life, and if they want a donut every now and then, they can have that. But what are they doing just to maintain that? So looking to some of those type of examples. Whenever it comes to like finding a mentor, for example, there's no such thing as like the ideal perfect person that's going to cover, every different aspect and element of life. But just in general, who are some of those people that are covering different types of aspects of life that maybe you want to become and what you want to head towards in the future?
That's great. Finding those mentors is sometimes key to being successful. So wonderful. Sure. If you could leave a legacy, what would that be? What would that look like? We talked about your goals, but
yeah, a legacy that this won't be surprising if people have been following along, but being a good husband, being a good father, like those things are really, really important to me. And this guy that I had lunch with the other day, this friend of mine who's, a multimillionaire, a very, very successful businessman, he would tell you like that stuff just doesn't matter, like it's nice and it's all well and good, but the legacy I want to leave is not that, oh, that guy was an amazing entrepreneur. Oh, that guy had a great podcast. Oh, he had this many 5-star reviews on iTunes, but it's like, no, that guy was a great husband. That guy was a great father. And like his wife really, really liked him, and his kids like really admired him and respected him. Like those are the things that really, really matter to me. So that's the kind of legacy I want to leave.
That is wonderful. Before we say goodbye, is there any final parting words of advice that you have, or maybe a favorite quote you'd like to share? And then please reiterate your contact information for us.
Yeah, I'd go back to what we talked about earlier, that line of who you are is more important than what you do. Because we live in a culture where oftentimes your work determines your worth. Meaning, when you meet someone for the first time, oftentimes you exchange 2 questions. What's your name? And what do you do? And as soon as someone tells you what they do, you have an idea of how much money they make, of what side of town they live on, of what brand of clothes they wear, what kind of car they drive, what kind of TV shows they watch, what kind of hobbies they have. Make all of these assumptions and judgments about you based solely on what you do. May not be right, may not be fair, may not be accurate. We all do it. You found out that I'm a motivational speaker. You assume that I live in a van down by the river. And I don't. Not anymore. We just moved out. I'm excited about that. So realize again that who you are is more important than what you do. Meaning if you're super successful, if you have a huge bank account, but if you are burning bridges and leaving a wake of destruction behind you for people that you love, that's just not worth it. So who you are is more important than what you do.
That is great. Thank you. And what about contact information?
Yeah, pretty much everything's going to be at grantbaldwin.com. Again, the podcast is called How Did You Get Into That? You can find that on iTunes or wherever you maybe listen to shows. And you can catch me online on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or any of those places. If people are interested in the speaking stuff, they can find that at bookedandpaidtospeak.com.
That's awesome. I'm going to have to check that out. That
cool.
sounds wonderful.
Yeah, for sure.
So thank you so much for joining us and for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rebecca. Enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. To learn more about Grant Baldwin, go to our show notes at theluminousmind.net. Be sure to become a subscriber to our free email list and consider joining our program by going to the scheduling tab to become a fire starter today. Help support the podcast by making all your Amazon purchases through the free Amazon widget on our website. Also, sign up to receive 2 free audiobooks from Audible at theluminousmind.net. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Google+. Get our audio content on YouTube, iTunes, and Stitcher. To help us grow, consider telling your friends about us. Leave us a review. Tell us how we can help you so together we can continue to light minds on fire and change the paradigm of education.